Hi, everyone. Recently, my longtime friend in the industry, Tim Wilson, joined me here at Search Discovery. And a lot of you know that now, but I want to talk about it really briefly because obviously we record the podcast together along with Mo, our other co-host. And as part of our podcast, we've strived over the years to be independent, not only of the vendors in the space, but even from our own companies to a certain extent, to be able to express a point of view that we really personally felt and believed in. And what I want to assure everybody is that we're still that same podcast and we're still those same people. We're not going to filter our views. And what's great about our respective companies is that they're not asking us to. And so that's something we want to share. We want to be proactive in talking about it because there are a lot of people who've got lots of interests in our industry, and we want to be upfront with you about what's happening with us. Anyway, we appreciate your listenership and we hope you keep listening. Here's to a great next year and more success for all of us. Thank you.
Welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. Tim, Michael, Mo, and the occasional guest discussing digital analytics issues of the day. Find them on Facebook at facebook.com/analytics hour and their website analyticshour.io. And now, the Digital Analytics Power Hour.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. This is episode 81. We like to keep things fresh around here, so today I've booted Michael out of the moderator chair and I'm giving it a red hot crack. Mainly, it's because I need a break from debating with Tim and to take a bit of a backseat. No, the real reason is, have you ever wondered whether you should chase those big, shiny management dollars or continue to crunch the data, becoming somewhat of an expert? And I use the term expert loosely around here. Now, I myself have been wondering this exact question at this point of my career. It's quite a tough call, really. Which is why I thought I would turn to my two co-hosts to get their sage-old advice. Welcome, as always, to the esteemed leader of people, manager of talent, regular show recruiter, Michael Helbling.
Hey, thanks, Mo.
An older than Mo guy.
Yeah, I'm the old part of the sage old.
Oh, you're just ramping up towards the next one.
You know what, Mo? It is a pleasure to be here. This is my second time as a guest on the show, and it's always delightful.
Great. And for my other co-host, welcome to the cruncher of data, analytics wizard, and supporter of clients, Tim Wilson.
And weighing in at 40 oldest.
I find that if you give your weight in stone, very few people can really translate on the fly.
Oh, dear. Now, before we get into the thick of things, I actually thought it would be really good to start off with, I guess, a little bit of background about both of you, about when was that aha moment that you knew that you wanted to head down one path, either that management path, looking after people, mentoring talent, or you really wanted to become a subject matter expert, you really wanted to keep, I guess, to analyzing?
So I want to make something clear right off the boot. I never wanted to actually do the job I do now, but I do it because it's necessary, but it's also because as an analyst, I love analyzing data, and eventually I want to get back to doing that. So long term, I want to probably still go back to being more on the analyst side than on the management side. That being said, I certainly have a perspective, and obviously stepping into a role where I'm responsible for managing a team, I want to be thoughtful about how I do that and leverage the skills I have and all those kinds of things. So I don't want it to seem like it's a mutually exclusive arrangement. At least from my perspective, I don't feel like it is.
You're looking forward to being a junior analyst 5 years from now when you all your skills.
Yeah, there are a lot of amazing internship opportunities as an analyst today that I feel that I could compete effectively for if I could just get to them before I turn 50. So,
well, I feel like I don't consciously remember ever thinking I want to jump into management, although I probably did. Like there was a point in my career as I bounced around before I sort of discovered analytics. I was kind of clearly individual contributor and loving what I was doing to some extent. I mean, hadn't found analytics yet. So I sort of stumbled into managing a small team kind of at the long end of a chain. And I thought, aha, now I'm on the management track. And so I think I spent a couple of years thinking, this is that progression, and I am now on this management track and I will always be managing people. So I went from 3 people to 4 to 5 to, back to 3 and then to like 20. And I think as I hit that, and then I had a couple of roles after leaving that company where I managed very, very small, 2 or 3. And I sort of found myself engineering my way out of managing those people. I think even when I had a team that was close to 20 people total, but I had like 3 or 4 people who were reporting to me. And I didn't really get comfortable until it was all clicking along, where that team was so solid, my direct reports, that I was just kind of there to help them out. And it was kind of I sort of felt like managing that department by committee, and that felt fine. Then the next time I shifted to where all of a sudden I was managing somebody again, I just caught myself being like, this is just not, I don't have the confidence and the comfort, and I struggle to figure out what even exactly that manager employee relationship really should be. And at the same time, I was finding myself in whatever time I had outside of meetings wanting to dive into, data deeper or different tools or projects. And so pretty quickly became evident as my career was progressing that I was finding ways to engineer my way out of managing. And I also at the same time was seeing people who were phenomenal. I had some amazing managers who were gifted and natural and talented at that. And in some cases I stepped into their roles and I was like, wow, I am, Allison could manage me. She was a mentor for me and a manager, and she actually wound up working for me for a while. And I was like, well, this is odd. She wanted to get back to an individual contributor role, and she's a better manager than I'll ever be. So I think I just embraced that as much as I like to work with other analysts and collaborate, actually managing a team, it just stresses me out.
Can I just ask, on the point you were making about Alison being a great manager, what was it about her that you think made her a good manager of analytics staff?
It's interesting because she did not come up through the analytics ranks. She was an engineer, I believe, who kind of inherited the BI team at the place that I worked. She knew the business inside and out. She was super, super highly regarded, and she was incredibly loyal to her team. And yet she was also did not shy away from, very direct conversations. And she was absolutely sharp enough that she did something that I see a lot of managers struggle who she did not come up through the ranks of using Oracle Discover and digging into the data, but she was a very, very, very quick study. She actually inherited the web analytics department and very quickly she wanted to understand the details of what I was saying was tricky about trying to capture this data or push it somewhere. She would engage to the point of making sure she understood what the issue was, and then she could go and represent that as needed. I mean, so she was definitely the high watermark in my career for managers, because she was both tough and direct, but she wasn't in love with management, I guess, was the thing. She wasn't of the ilk of, yes, just go do that analysis. And, what do you mean that took you 3 days? Like, why did that take you more than 2 hours? Like, she understood what was messy, which I think that can be a challenge for people who have not done analysis to understand what sometimes can be very time consuming of getting the data, cleaning the data, sifting through it. So I don't know. That could be my homage to Alison Ferguson. I'm not in super close touch with her outside of like exchanging Christmas cards, but she was amazing.
So that actually brings me on to my next question, which is, I guess there is a view, and it's pretty common in our industry, that in order to be a really effective leader of analysts, you need to have been a really effective analyst. Michael, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm living proof that that's not true. Actually, let's flip that around, because maybe I'm not an effective leader of analysts either. So,
oh wait, which one were you saying? Yeah.
No, I will say this, and it's a little bit of a tie back to the original discussion around sort of this progression. I know early on in my career, I felt like I had to manage people to show progress in my analytics career, like as if that was a milestone that I must achieve as part of my career growth. And it was mostly because I saw others doing that. And so I thought, well, that has to be me too. I need to develop myself into a position of managing a team of analysts as a natural progression of my growth as an analyst. And I think it took time for me to kind of look at that and be like, well, actually, Tim, you and I would talk about this when you were managing a big team at an agency and not really enjoying all the aspects of those things about kind of not wanting to go that way. And it was kind of helped me shift my thinking about maybe you don't have to manage people to still develop and advance your career. And honestly, like that's part of my mentality is managing people is a whole other skill set than being an analyst. So we should really treat them as different. And not everyone who's a good analyst should be a manager, and not everybody who's a manager needs to be an analyst. So I totally agree. Probably my best analytics manager was also someone who was not an analyst historically.
But it does sound like being able to, I guess, empathize with the role and the challenges is a key quality.
Absolutely. So I think, well, for any effective manager, empathy or emotional intelligence, like I'm a huge proponent of that as a contributor to success. And so that's really important. But honestly, for most organizations, the attribute of a manager that is probably the most important to success and impact for the analytics team is probably more about their ability to understand and navigate the political structure of that organization than it is to know about regressions or sophisticated analyses. Because the ability to bring the right data or the right data interpretation into the right place and time and the right preparedness level is way more important than they being good at analysis individually. And so you can see how that's a very different skill than actually managing the numbers. Because it's the typical trope or the same thing again and again. I keep telling the organization what we need to do and no one's listening to me. A great analytics manager is putting analysts in a position to be heard and listened to, and is preparing them to know, here's what you need to do to have your ideas accepted by this group of people. I can steer you down that path and give you the tools to do that. And then your preparation will then meet the opportunity.
So is it fair to say there's part of managing people that is the actual managing of people? There's also part of the management role, which is typically ownership of the strategy and the roadmap for that group, that That's department, right? So I think there's a complement to what you're saying around the manager. And actually, I will go back to, I was not going to meant to be an homage to a manager that I had years ago, but her strategic mind of putting the bits and pieces together, because I've watched cases where somebody's gotten hired to come in and manage, and they immediately go to an implementation, a data capture thing, or a new technology. They go in and they're like, especially if they're hired from outside, there's a motivation to make a very discrete change and to say, we are going to buy this product from this company, or I am going to sit down and do an RFP process and we're going to swap out Google for Adobe or Adobe for Google or Google for Snowplow or, you name it. And I think that can be very detrimental if you go from implementation versus process versus people. Yeah. Then a good manager has to have the appropriate balance and figure out what is the way that we're moving this forward. And it's not going to be fast enough for anybody to be happy, the people on the team or the management. And so that expectations have to be set. So then you're back into the kind of the political side of things. But I think I see that in cases too, where a manager comes in and because they haven't cut their teeth enough to realize that you have to move all of these things forward at once. And that's kind of an engineering challenge.
Well, and so like I would start to say to you that there's a difference between sort of a manager and maybe like a senior manager, director level in terms of thinking through strategic direction and those kinds of things, because somebody can manage a team of people without necessarily being on the hook for delivering that level of strategy. It is necessary for the organization to be able to have that and have here's where we're trying to go. Here's the vision and direction we're trying to take. It's a mandatory element. But if you think about it, that could be done at that level, or it could be done at a level above too, depending on the person.
That's fair.
So where do you both see the role then for the very senior practitioner who is the subject matter expert? They're the most experienced analyst in the company. I only know one company I've heard of who's doing this fairly well, and I don't know from the inside whether or not it's going well. How does that work where you go, okay, actually, I don't want to be a people manager. I really just want to become an expert in my field. How do you still have that progression? But also, how do you have the respect within the business to be included in those meetings if you don't have that manager title? Because I think that can be the conundrum.
I'll let my manager answer that question.
So, sorry.
We're going to be working through this dynamic for a while on the podcast.
There's actually a really great book, and I want to get the title right, so I'm going to Google search it. But I believe it's like you don't need a title to be a leader. And I feel like it does not get read enough. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. You don't need a title to be a leader. The idea of leadership is the thing that we need to embrace as analysts. Really, what we're trying to do is not have a title that imbues us with some sort of organizational respect. What we're really trying to do is develop influence to move the organization in the way that we see it needing to go. And so as an analyst, leadership comes from developing that level of influence. And it doesn't absolutely have to live within a specific title within the organization. Now, titles are sometimes important for various reasons. So I'm not saying just be an analyst your whole life, but as you get more along, title means less and less to you, I would say. Because, to me, I just don't care. I know what I'm going to go try to do, and I don't need a title to go do it. But other people, they need to. That wasn't true of me 8 years ago. I needed a title. I wanted to make it to a certain level. That was my objective and my goal. So that changes. It changed for me over time. But that's the idea that I think is important for people to grasp hold of is how do I develop my influence within the organization, whether or not I have a title to back it up at all, I guess is the way I'd say that.
And I think there are organizations, and I mean, I was joking about it earlier, but I mean, Search Discovery is kind of embracing that, I think, that's an agency. So that's weird. So it's a little different, but I would say consulting in general, consulting is inherently kind of, if you go that path, there's a very good chance, even if you're at a big three consulting firm, there's some level of titles, but kind of there is kind of a progression of individual contribution. Going back to that same company that this wonderful Allison was at, I mean, we had a BI team that had a extremely senior analyst, and she absolutely commanded respect throughout the company. And she had tried managing as well, and she didn't really enjoy it, and she wasn't really that, awesome at it. And everybody recognized her. She had stature, and she was well compensated. But to me, that was partly to the organization's credit. And that was a company that had a ton of engineers and a ton of software developers, and they had pretty well recognized that there are lots of these roles where, we don't want to just fall prey to the Peter principle and move people into management. So I think there is some dependence on the company to the extent that they say, oh, we're going to define career tracks where that's an option.
That's the key right there is you have to give a career progression path on both sides. In other words, some companies career progression doesn't happen unless you take over and manage a team or teams. And so if that's true, then there's nowhere for you to go in your organization except down that management path. And knowing that is really important because as an analyst, I think this is where a lot of us get hung up, which is if I go off and do this management thing, actually, it's funny because over the last 6 months, I've probably had 5 or 6 conversations with people who have found themselves in, management positions, but sort of yearning or longing for doing the analysis or growing in their expertise that they're kind of missing because of the other work that they're doing. It's sometimes not possible to do that. And then if you set up the organization, though, such that it recognizes the contribution capable of someone who is developed as an analyst to a certain point, that then could be a career path that does not require people reporting as part of its function. And again, you have to have in your mind that obviously if someone is at a senior level as a subject matter expert, their impact or influence should be pretty profound. And so that's what you want to be building toward if you're going to stay on the expertise path, is how do I drive more results and more capabilities across an organization from my one spot in the org. It's not by doing the same things all the time. So even on the analyst side, it's not about being a better analyst as much as it's also learning some additional skills around how to use those analyst skills to drive and be more influential. Or at least that would be my perspective.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment, because it does sound like there are some companies who are starting to move in towards the right direction of understanding that you need, I don't know, sometimes referred to as like a practice lead, people who are expert, whatever you want to call it. And they should be compensated fairly for that. They have earned respect throughout the years and have innate leadership. But if you're working at a company not like that, and particularly, like, let's take consulting out of it, because that seems to be an area that does get it.
Not very much.
I'm trying to think.
Saying it's not true everywhere in consulting, in very few places.
But in some companies, it seems to be more, I guess, better understood in some companies. I'm trying to think really practically for our listeners. Let's say you're a mid-level analyst at a big company. I mean, how do you earn that leadership position without the title if you're not like, and I'm just talking like, I'm lucky I don't work at a particularly hierarchical organization, but if you are, like, if you're not even in the meeting, if you don't even know, like, you don't even have your blinkers off because you're so in whatever tunnel that you're in. I mean, how do you even become part of those conversations to start affecting change if you're just not even in the room because you don't have the title or the, I don't know,
I think you're making it sound a little too black and white. I mean, I think there's a point where I think just the natural, any career progression, any role is you're doing role X, and it appears that, well, no, take that back. There are cases where just through tenure, you kind of get progressed up through, role X, staff X, senior X, whatever. And that's kind of, you're letting time drive it. I think a much more productive way to drive your career is to say, I need to be doing X, but I'm going to do X plus one. I'm going to find what that plus one is, and I'm going to, I say weasel my way into it. But then at some point, somebody's like, wow, you keep doing this X plus one, there's this other role open, or we want to progress you. So as long as, if you're always exceeding expectations, then that's giving you the permission to go to your manager, probably, maybe to HR, and say, what is the track? Like, I actually realize I'm on this path. I don't really want your job. I don't want to be managing 5 people. I want to continue to progress, but I want to do it as this individual contributor. And I think there's an opportunity to do bigger things as a contributor. How can we figure out a way to try that out? And maybe that is let's carve out another project that is well beyond what I'm expected to do and see if that pays dividends. The nice thing about analytics is that I think generally a lot of those more senior roles, they obviously pay for themselves. When you say, I just made the business, $1 million because I spent 3 months doing this thing. Nobody else was even understood how to do it to pull this data together. Sure, yeah, we'll call you, senior grand poobah,
Right.
whatever, and we'll pay you a good salary. You're making with zero direct reports. So to me, it does feel a little more organic, but it also goes with conversations up the chain. And if you've got a manager who is living in 1952 saying, nope, these are our HR pay bands, and this is the description and the role. HR has mechanisms for writing HR wasn't writing senior systems architects job descriptions in 1982, and yet every company has senior systems architects now. So there are processes in companies to define new roles. And I have many times in my career been part of that. Here's the new role. Let me help write what that is and define what that is and define where it falls in seniority. But also, if you get shut down, then you leave. If you can't.
The other thing worth noting is that there's a paradigm for this that's been in effect for a long time in the software development world, right? So architects,
like the architect, yeah.
So those roles are individual contributor roles that people build up to over years of software development or web development, whatever it is. Those people are highly experienced, well compensated, well regarded people, and so we can use that in a little bit of a paradigm if we want to try to understand how we might roll that out in the context of analytics, because in a lot of ways there's a lot of similarities, in a certain sense. Like I have a good friend who spent his whole career as a developer in one organization, and the level he's at, the next level above him is sort of this architect role, and there are these expectations. It's not just that I'm going to be a really, really good developer. It's I'm going to be published in these journals. I'm going to speak at these kinds of events. And so there's ways that you can actually map the influence and contribution of these senior level experts to what they actually create as impact for the organization or for the industry or whatever. So in a certain sense, that influentialness also attracts people to that organization, right? So, I mean, Tim Wilson is, people will want to come work with Tim Wilson, I think. I do.
Well, have we talked about whether like an analytics architect, and maybe that has the risk of being interpreted purely around systems? But I think to that point, when you advance and saying, and I think to the DAA's credit, like their competency framework, they don't necessarily say, oh, and then by the time you're level 3, you're managing. There is a breadth of internalization and vision and figuring out the ecosystem of the technology and process and people, or some subset of that really just, and also depth of knowledge about the business. There is a point where it's like, wow, I know all these parts, and it doesn't mean that I know how to connect social data and our CRM data and our mobile data and our web analytics data. But if I'm being compensated to go figure that out, I uniquely, as this senior person, have the ability to go and figure it out. And that's what you're paying me for as an individual contributor. And that's not a management role. And there's tremendous value. The organization still has to recognize, they're taking a bet that, just like upgrading their phone system, that they're like, yeah, it's worth having somebody who gets the system, and can help figure out that the sum of the parts are greater than the whole. And it is more of kind of an architecture role often.
Yeah. And so there's a blurry line in analytics, digital analytics specifically, which is there is sort of a technical track that a lot of people in our industry get into where they're doing very technical things. And then there's also kind of the analyst, or sort of more business analyst track, if you will, that kind of guides you kind of not as technical. So like there's two, and maybe you can even cut it up further than that, because depending on where you would stick something like data science and that kind of stuff, where does that live? Is it separate from those two things? Because there's a lot to be said for somebody who really can strategically understand the intricacies of how to do an implementation with various tools in the right way, versus someone who can then take that data and really make meaningful business decisions with it, versus, somebody who is going to take and do a lot of cool statistical analysis and machine learning or things like that with it. So there's a lot of ways you could slice and dice it. But yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so I have a few more, key points that I really want to hit on today, getting all of this sage advice out of both of you. The first one is on mentoring. So let's say hypothetically you have this team where you have a really senior analytics manager, but you also have a really senior analytics practitioner in the one team. Where does the coaching and the mentoring sit? I mean, do you both still see that as the function of the actual people manager, or is that a function of if you have a really strong practice lead in your team? Like, how do you think it works?
It depends on what the person needs or is trying to grow on. If somebody really is hell-bent on growing to become a people manager and they're gravitating to that, then I think their manager may mentor them. I would think if somebody's saying, no, I am really jazzed up about the intricacies of this implementation, or I still think that falls to the individual who is looking for some oversight. The manager is going to be responsible for making sure the environment is there, that's supported, that the time and the encouragement and the kudos for the senior practitioner get some recognition for spending the time to do that. But I don't know. This is more your area, Michael.
Well, I will tell you this. Sharing what you know is something that we should all do from every level, from every direction. We owe it to ourselves and we owe it to those who come behind us to share what we've learned. And honestly, one of the most heartwarming things I see in the organization that I work in is when there are people who've only been, doing this for a couple of years or even less, sharing and helping someone who's just a little less experienced in that regard on their own, of their own volition, just seeing that they need help and going in and helping that person. That's amazing. That's what analytics people should be like, because then we'll develop people more quickly. Because let's put it this way. If it was on me to mentor every single person in my organization, A, they would all come up with my faults, which are many, and B, I wouldn't possibly be able to get to every person.
Do you want me to send you that list now, or you want me to wait for another week or two?
No, Tim, you're front and center on no. This is the whole show is going to be awkward from now on, Tim.
I'll do my best to make that happen.
I'm trying not to talk about search discovery. Anyways, but my point is that it comes from every angle. Honestly, my job as a leader of people is to make sure it's being done, not that I am personally doing it, I guess is the way I would say that. Yeah.
So I agree with both of you. I guess, so someone recently shared a viewpoint with me at an analytics catch up, which I was really just floored with. And this particular viewpoint was that this particular analyst had always done it alone. They had taught themselves everything, completely self-taught. And the view was that it's part of the analyst DNA to dig and to figure out stuff on your own. You shouldn't need to ask someone what's in a particular database because you should do the homework yourself. And part of becoming really familiar with that data is doing that digging yourself and not getting support. And it leads me to a question that I've never asked either of you is like, have you guys had mentors or coaches, and like, how did that work? Because I don't think I've ever asked you that.
So I do agree a little bit in there being a balance between sort of the RTFM and asking people for help. So there is sort of like, you want independence, but collaboration, I guess, is the way that I would try to balance that, which is, as an analyst, you should be pushing to gain knowledge on your own. As an analytics team, we should be sharing knowledge and helping each other when you're getting stuck. And if that balance swings too far in one direction by that individual, there will be a problem in the team or a problem with that person. right? So if a one person is always like, I need help with this, and it's literally right there, you could just read about it, or one Google search would literally get that for you. Then a couple of let me Google that for you links is a good way to kind of encourage people to kind of step it up a little bit. On the other hand, like throwing somebody in the deep end and being like, well, I sure hope you figure it out, because this project's got to be done by next Friday, and you're going to get fired if you don't get it done. Like, this poor person's going to work nonstop for the next week and a half and lose a bunch of sleep. And it's like, well, that's not very nice. Like, if you could support that person and get them where they need to be, then why wouldn't you? So it's a balance, is my opinion.
Well, and I will say I've never formally had a mentor. I guess now I've actually formally been a mentor, but I have a list that I could sit down and write, 20 different people who I look up to in all aspects of analytics, who, again, I want to not look, I don't ever want to get, read the fucking manual, link, or let me Google that for you. I guess the digital equivalent note from them. So I always am going to dive in and say, how much of this can I figure out? I think I've got this figured out. Let me beat my head against the wall. I've learned that I don't want to beat my head against the wall for a week and then have them tell me, I could answer that in 2 seconds. That's inefficient. So there is a finding a balance. There are definitely people who like the formality of a mentor-mentee relationship. And I've now seen that be very productive, both for me and the people that I've mentored. But I personally feel like, no, there are people in my head that I try to make sure I'm staying in touch with because I want to get their thoughts on things.
Yeah, I think I've definitely had mentors. And what's funny is some of my most influential ones have not been in the field of analytics. Some people have just been like my counselor at an organization I worked at, or my boss. But it's interesting because like those people have been influential because I see the things they're doing to be successful in their role, and I translate it into what I need to do or learn to be successful in what I do. You can find mentors anywhere from sort of where there is, good help to be found. And like, it was not formal. Like, I didn't go to Tim and be like, let me be your disciple, or whatever. I probably should have. It would have made Tim feel super awkward. But it's sort of like, yeah, I'm just going to hang out and try not to be a nuisance. And maybe there's something I can contribute to, but we'll all just sort of learn from each other or whatever. But then there's been people who've been very much, in my early career, there was Chris Grant she worked for a whole other agency in a different state, but was just someone who was so willing to share the knowledge she'd learned about web trends as a software that I learned so much from her, and then learned a lot from her in terms of my career development over the years as well. So like, there's just people that sort of stick out. And like in the last 5 years, Mike Gustafson and Lee Blankenship, who are, my boss and my CEO now, are people I feel like I've learned a ton from. Neither of those people are analytics people necessarily, but I've just grown a lot from being around them. So yeah, mentorship is important.
So for you now, Michael, as a manager, where do you draw the line and say, I should spend this extra time I have, I've got half day on Friday, or my training budget, or whatever it is. And where do you decide I'm going to spend that money on my management skills versus doing something more different with your analytics trade?
If I had a great answer to that question, Mo, I think we'd be twice the company we are today. No, I will say this. It is hard to figure out, and I think you have to kind of balance it. The other thing, though, is it's important to recognize. So like, I am a manager. I have a team. Some of my team will listen to this show and I will feel, embarrassed or whatever, because they'll probably say something to me about it, and that's cool, whatever. Hi guys, if you're listening. If you're not listening, why aren't you listening? No, kidding. It's not mandatory, but it's not that I have to be some level of expert to do my job most days. It's that I need to understand where that expertise is going to come from or how we will deliver that. So it's not important that I be the one to do it. It's important that it gets done. So someone else could do this job and not have my background in analytics and be as or more successful in the role, right? It's a role that I play. So in that regard, I could leave this role and take on another role where I could switch my time or expand my time. But today my focus is on 6 different. I have a job description, and in that job description, there are 6 categories or areas that I'm responsible for as the practice lead. And so in those are kind of where we're going, what's our vision, what's our go to market, what's our, operationally, how are we going to function? How do we handle our client delivery? All those things. But so in a certain sense, I need to have at least an understanding of our current marketplace such that I understand what's possible with the tools and what do our customers need from us in our context to be able to deliver. What should we be delivering to our clients? And so if I can keep abreast of those 2 things, then I've probably done enough. And typically I do that by reading a lot, attending or trying to speak at a couple conferences every year, and reading a lot of books. So that's how I do it. But more important to me is how the other leaders within the organization, how are they getting a chance to build and develop that opinion, or how am I drawing on that? So that's really, because if I'm doing my job right, there's a whole other group of analytics leaders that are emerging from within the organization who are even smarter, better, and more knowledgeable than me, and have honed their craft now and are ready to step up into these positions of providing deep industry experience and insight. And that's what I'm trying to learn how to build. Because, at the end of the day, if that group is, then we've taken something I can do as one person and we've multiplied it out and scaled it across a bunch of people, we've created something really special. So that's the hope.
If I can be in the awkward spot of chiming in, even though I'm not in that role, but this was somebody who I am mentoring, and she's kind of moved into a management role, got a small team. One of the people on the team is a total R, loves kind of is diving and learning and growing on that. And she's like, I don't have the bandwidth to do that. And I sort of pointed out to her, but you have somebody who works for you who is an expert and is on that journey. It is not that hard to engineer, the next project. Say, you know what, could you obsessively comment the code? I'd like to just manage to run the code myself. And if you spend, we'll spend the first 15 minutes of our one-on-one making sure I've got the stuff installed, if that's what you're pursuing. To Michael's credit, I remember it was like 6 months ago or so, you were like, hey, this person on my team was just walking me through some of the stuff he's doing. And again, this was in the context of R. And you're like, hey, that's really cool. A lot of managers of analytics, because it's gotten so broad and so deep, there is going to be expertise and they work for you. So don't put a burden on them, but you've got an ability to say, in this context, what's the way that I can get a bite-sized benefit? Oh, hey, you're also getting the opportunity to maybe present on what you did to the team. You can kind of build some of your own curriculum. So there are opportunities there to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, or 3 birds with 1 stone in some cases.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it, is I don't need to be an expert on every topic, because I can leverage somebody else who's done the work. And that's exciting. That's super exciting. And they've been passionate to want to go learn something. It's like, wow, that just makes me feel like a genius. And I don't know jack squat. I wanted, even on the podcast, with Tim kind of delving into R over the last couple of years, I've been jealous. I was like, I want to learn R, and I even downloaded it, and SEMO has encouraged me to learn it. And I do aspire to be in there and actually learn how to do some stuff. Although now I'm kind of thinking I just jump straight to Python. I don't know. Vote on that on our Facebook page. You think I should?
So I'm taking my moderator duties today very seriously, which means I'm channeling Fran Kelly from Radio National in Australia, for those familiar with her. And I have one question, but to take us to the news, you only have 30 seconds to answer.
Ooh, Tim, that's going to be tough for you.
This is going to be tough for both of you. So
I can do it in 3 words. What is it?
Oh, good. Oh, no, because now you're really going to be like yes or no.
Yeah.
And your answer can't be yes or no.
Okay.
Do you think it's feasible that someone could do both roles? So they could be analyst this percentage of the time, manager this percentage of the time. Do you think it's possible?
It all depends.
So that means I get to take 50 seconds.
There you go.
I think it can be possible. It does depend. I think to me, it depends on the organization, but I think there are cases where, yes, probably not where you're responsible for a 50-person analytics organization at Dell to be the manager of that organization. But I absolutely think at organizations that are small to mid-sized teams, and I even think you can divide up the duties of the people management particularly. I actually think kind of some level of management by committee. Yes, I think it absolutely can be done. I think that there is a scale issue where naturally one of those will start to crowd out the bandwidth for the other over time as there's growth.
It goes back to portfolio and size. So if you're managing a small team, then you should probably have some time still to spend in direct work yourself. And that's great. The key or the trick, Tim made mention of this, is not to spend your time doing work that would be better done by your team, but doing work that it would be an enhancement or additional for your team. So you get more. But as your team grows, your ability to do that shrinks. So you just have to be realistic about it. And trust me, your company will push you on this already. So you have to create the space accordingly.
I've watched occasionally where somebody comes in to and there's a 2-person team and they're going to manage them. And they're like, I'm just the manager. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing with all your time? You've got 2 people. How can you possibly be spending 100%? There's no way that you should not be a player coach if it's a really small
And at the same time, if you're managing 15 to 20 people and you're spending all your time in the data, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
And that's all I have to say about
This is true.
Okay.
Well, as Michael always says, it has been so fantastic speaking to you. I could talk about this topic all day. But
Mo, I managed to make it sound convincing when I say it.
I'm not sure I was trying to be convincing today.
Why?
I think you just called me out on what you were really saying every time you say it with sincerity. Sincerity.
I believe I should take back these moderator duties ASAP.
On that note, though, I will defer to our esteemed leader / normal moderator, Michael, for his last call.
Oh, last call. Okay. So a couple of things. So right this second, obviously, the Digital Analytics Power Hour is warming up by the fireplace in Hungary at Super Week. So be ready for an episode coming soon from that. But over the holiday, I have been getting into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And so I have a funny video I found on YouTube of JP Sears talking about how to talk about Bitcoin with your friends. So that's my last call. It's hilarious. And also,
it is. I've seen it.
Don't at me about cryptocurrencies. I don't want to know. All right. Talk to you. I feel like Ben Gates.
And over to you, Tim.
So I am also going to do a little throwback to this. Is something that I caught over the holidays, and it's extremely tactical. And it was actually out of the Conversion XL, which Mo will be, we believe, speaking at in Austin here in a bit. But Conversion XL, and a lot of times it's these 11 things, 10 things, whatever. But they did a post of 11 analytics experts share their favorite new features of GA and Google Tag Manager. And it's got some things that actually sort of inspired me to be like, oh, I'm going to go dabble with that. I am not in GTM much at all. But there were some things that I was like, I guess I was not paying really close attention. And there were some kind of cool things in that list. So it's worth scanning to say, or some of these kind of easy updates that I should take advantage of. It seemed like a nice little article. It's got Simo's got one, Jeff Sauer's got one, Krista has one. That seems like a little bit of a homer. She had to be the 11th.
I wish I had time to dabble in GTM, Tim. No. I think
we all
that's right.
We're on.
Or those paths choose us or something.
As Mo was giving me some shit about, implementing a CMO blog post from 2015 on the analyticshour.io site. She's like, yeah, that's what you do for fun over the holidays.
Great
Good
job.
on you, Tim.
Hey, yeah, Mo.
So what about you?
do?
What's yours, Mo?
So this is going to be either amazing or embarrassing. I don't know which. And the reason is I have no idea if Tim has ever mentioned this before. But in January, I did a bit of housekeeping. And of course, as a podcast, we share some, Google Sheets as you do. And Tim had created this really cool thing on it, which was basically like you push a button and it creates a Bitly link for you. So it links to your Bitly API. Tim, have you mentioned this before? You're already cackling.
No, I have not mentioned this. This was just something I hacked together at some point.
So, yeah, this is my point. Tim does this shit for fun. Anyway, he hacked together, basically you go into your tools and into script editor, and he's built this little script that when you press a button in your Google Sheet, it auto-generates a Bitly link for you. And for me, has freaking changed my life. As my last calls often do, because instead of going to Bitly for every single link now, I just press this one button. So this is me spurring Tim on to do more goodness for the community and sharing some details around how to do this in our show notes.
Oh, shit. Excellent. So now I've got to actually make that script public. Son of a bitch.
Anyway, for the marketers out there, I thought particularly someone that's sharing links all the time, it might come in handy.
Mo, what's an Australian compliment if somebody does a good job with something? Is it like crackerjack? Is there a crackerjack? Is that a thing?
Good on you?
Yeah, no. Good on you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good on.
Well, never mind.
Crackerjack is like a crazy person.
Yeah. Crackerjack job.
Those compliments you thought when you were last in Australia, Michael, apparently they weren't
compliments. All right, well, good on you as the moderator today.
I think good on you is probably pretty relevant. So, Michael, can you let our listeners know where they can find us?
Absolutely, Mo. You can find us on the Measure Slack, on Twitter, and on our Facebook page, or at analyticshour.io. And if you're listening on iTunes and you like the show, we'd love it if you would be willing to rate and review the show. All right, back to you, Mo.
So for my two co-hosts, keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, or Measure Slack group. We welcome your comments and questions. Visit us on the web at analyticshour.io, facebook.com/analyticshour, or at analyticshour on Twitter.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
Oh man, I was doing so well today.
I basically have spent the last 2 weeks getting big into cryptocurrency. So that's the only thing.
Have you bought some Ripple?
You know what's hilarious? I did buy some Ripple. Oh my gosh, Mo, you're so prepared. Not used to this. Well, Tim actually knew about Ripple, which is surprising. So it means he knows a thing or two as well.
So I would think, I think that, so is it fair to say?
Trying to frame that delicately, Tim.
I'm trying to start it in a good way.
I just need to sign off now. Well, honestly, Tim, you were a mentor to me early in my career, because Tim back in the day would write these blog posts about Excel and how to do cool stuff, and then have links to all the other Excel gurus out there. And I would be over, in Cleveland, Ohio at the time, 2.5 hours away, copying down everything Tim was doing and trying it out and learning Excel. No, I'm just saying, you'll get on there. It goes way back.
We'll cut all that out.
Anyways, I'm just saying, Tim,
I'm blushing.
Whatever. You wrote it.
Yeah. Do you want Michael to bring it home? Because I realized maybe we didn't have you put your notes.
No, absolutely not, Mo. You take it the rest of the way. We are but passengers on the great ship Mo Kiss.
No, we're pausing. I have got nothing. I'm wait. So for my two...
A well-oiled machine.
You know that shit show here means that was a debacle, not literally a shit episode.
rock flag and career growth.